Good morning and welcome to worship. We welcome those of you worshiping with us on YouTube. We invite you to share your joys and concerns with me or with Bunny in the office and to prepare and gather your supplies for communion. Would you stand, please, and join me in the call to worship? Take delight in the Lord who satisfies the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord and trust in God's actions. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for God. The Lord is our salvation and our refuge in times of trouble. Our opening hymn, Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee.
Maybe not quite that with the Clark, but
okay.
As they fished in
raised from the dead. Jesus was a miracle man. The wind and the water obeyed his command.
He could feed the hungry, make a blind man see.
He could cast out demons, set the captive free. He could heal the sick with the touch of his hand. Jesus was a miracle man. A miracle man. He was a miracle man.
I've been practicing how to say Gennesaret for the last 2 weeks, and I still got it wrong. All right. We're in the Gospel of Luke. We're in chapter 6. We're picking up exactly where we finished last week. We're in what scholars of Luke call the Sermon on the Plain. It's the kind of model Luke gives us, similar to the Sermon on the Mount from Gospel of Matthew, much of the same material. But I say to you who are willing to hear, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on the cheek, offer the other one as well. If someone takes your coat, don't withhold your shirt either. Give to everyone who asks, and don't demand your things back from those who take them. Treat people in the same way that you want them to treat you. If you love those who love you, why should you be commended? Even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, why should you be commended? Even sinners do that. If you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, why should you be commended? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be paid back in full. Instead, love your enemies, do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. If you do, you will have a great reward. You will be acting the way children of the Most High act, for He is kind to ungrateful and wicked people. Be compassionate just as your Father is compassionate. Don't judge, and you won't be judged. Don't condemn, and you won't be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good portion, packed down, firmly shaken and overflowing, will fall into your lap. The portion you give will determine the portion you receive in return. I was a pretty good trumpet player in high school. Played a little bit in college, not too much by that time. I was studying music, and you kind of being a trumpet player and a singer at the same time, so it's a lot of time. So through high school, did pretty well. Played the trumpet, played my mother's cornet that she played in high school in the 30s and at Central Methodist College in the early 40s. By the time I was a junior in high school, I was first chair in the in the band. We weren't very good, so it's not a great achievement. There were about 40 of us total, so being the first chair trumpet was not a thing, but I was pretty proud of it. My sophomore year, I was second chair, and the guy that was first chair was a senior, and he was a good guy, a good friend of mine, good player. I decided I would be gracious to him and not challenge him his senior year. So I allowed him to maintain the first chair until my junior year. That's how I thought about it. And I had assumed that this was somehow a God-given right, that I was placed in this position and that nothing would change. And then Ben came into my attention. Ben was another trumpet player who really hadn't been very good, and then suddenly got a lot better. And Ben had a nicer trumpet than I did. He had a brand new silver Bach trumpet, and I was playing my 50-year-old old mom's cornet. He could play higher than I could, he could play faster than I could, he could double and triple tongue, which if you don't know what that is, that's just what trumpet players do to play really high notes, really fast notes. I could kind of do it, but not very well. But he could not sight read. And he had some rhythm issues, which I knew, and I took advantage of whenever possible. So I managed to keep him at bay in the band situation, and then shockingly, he was a year older than I was, so this was a senior year. I only had to hold him off for another few months. We were a part of the Kansas City School District. The Kansas City School District had its own honors band. We auditioned, and the list came out, and he and I were first and second chair. However, I was second, and he was first, and I was not pleased. Now, I know that I tell you that he had some rhythm issues, and once he had beaten me in the audition for honors band, I began to really examine and figure out what was going on. Know thy enemy, Sun Tzu tells us. If I could just figure out what it was that he was doing, I could keep him at bay. And here's what I figured out. He was very knowledgeable about music. He knew that 2/8 notes is a quarter note and 4/16 notes and a dot and blah, blah, blah. And so he seemed to play everything okay by himself, but when you put him with the band, it didn't go very well. And I noticed that when he played, he tapped his foot. And his playing would always be perfectly in time with the tapping of his foot. However, when he got to something that was hard, his foot would slow down. Which doesn't work very well for the rest of the band. We can't just slow down for the hard stuff and let Ben catch up with us. So he would, easy stuff is he'd tap his foot pretty fast and he'd be playing perfectly in time with his foot. And then when it got hard, his foot would slow down and he'd play the hard stuff and then he'd speed back up. Well, once I figured this out, I was like, I got you, man. And I'm never gonna tell you how you could fix this. So my place as the appointed first chair trumpet player, both at Van Horn High School and at Kansas City School District, did come to fruition because we got to the first rehearsal of the Kansas City District Honors Band. He's sitting first chair, I'm sitting second chair, and we were sight reading some music, and let me be kind. His foot was moving all over the place. Let's put it that way. His foot was not with the conductor. And in the middle of the first rehearsal, I've never seen this happen before, the director stopped. He looked, he pointed at the two of us, and he did this. And we were like, what do you mean? And he's like, you two stand up. Switch. And I sat down in the first chair of the Kansas City District Honors Band, never to give it up again. Knowing my enemy's weakness and using it against him. He's a really pretty nice guy. We spent a lot of time together. He was actually, I remembered as I was working on this sermon that he and I were in a men's quartet together. And we sang together, we went to contests, we spent a lot of time together, and he was like the nicest human being on the planet. He's one of those people that was like always happy and always smiling, and it was kind of annoying. Because I wanted to not like him, because he was my enemy. He was threatening my trumpet kingdom. Adam picked up the reins of the brass tradition in our family. Melody's father played the French horn, my mother played the trumpet, actually in the band together one semester at Central Methodist College. It's another story. Melody played the baritone. That's another story. Somehow Josh ended up playing the saxophone. That's another story. But Adam picked up the brass reins and played trumpet. And you were first chair for most of your years at 3 years at show off, at North Kansas City High School. And then he went on to play in the marching band at TCU one year. And so we went down our first visit to the campus at TCU in Fort Worth, Texas, where it's always warm, right? And we went down for an October football game against Iowa State, and we picked the day when it was like 47 degrees and a 30-mile-an-hour wind howling from the north and rain. And we were not prepared for this. So it seems like it was maybe an 11 o'clock game. We went and visited the the clothing stores and got decked out in additional purple TCU gear, long sleeves. I think about a baseball hat. Plus our seats were up at the top of the upper. It was just, the game itself was miserable. Plus they lost. The band was fantastic, but so right before the game, the band had a pregame meal of Chick-fil-A sandwiches at University Christian Church, which is a Disciples of Christ church that's right on the campus. TCU is a Disciples of Christ based institution. And I for some reason, I wanted to go check in with Adam. He'd been at marching band warm-ups. He was walking over to eat his pregame meal, and I went and intercepted him, and I saw him walking down the sidewalk. And it's raining, and I'm freezing, and I have on my black and my purple TCU gear. My raincoat, however, is Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs raincoat, which everybody in the world knows is a Kansas City Chiefs raincoat. It's red and gold, and I thought, I gotta wear it. It's the only coat I have. And he saw me from very far away, and as he got closer, he said, "Dad, you really need to get rid of that jacket." And I said, "Why?" And he's like, "It's the wrong colors." And I was like, "They're Chiefs colors." He said, "Iowa State." I said, No. Chiefs colors and Iowa State colors are not the same. I'll be fine. And just to prove it, here's an image of the Kansas City Chiefs red, which is red. The Iowa State Reds, which is cardinal, not red. Okay, the golds are the same. And dark red. So our reds are completely different reds, right? So, and my jacket is red. There are little pipings of gold and white on it. But I was like, no, I'll be fine. It didn't go well. I think it was an 11 o'clock game, which meant that a lot of the people we ran into before we got into the game started drinking about 4:30 in the morning. And as we followed the band over, and they did their march around the stadium, the first thing I heard was from, just as I walked up, some guy yelling, "You look really confused." And I was like, "Excuse me," looking behind me. And he's this guy, and then he calls the attention to the entire crowd. "This guy doesn't know what team he's," he didn't talk like that, but "this guy doesn't know what team he's rooting for." And I'm like, "I'm wearing a TCU hat, I have a TCU thing." And he's like, "You got Iowa State jacket and your TCU thing." And I was like, okay, one guy is gonna give me grief about this. And that lasted for the next 4 hours. Everywhere I went, and it's Chiefs. I'm like, "But we're in Dallas, Fort Worth, they don't know. This is Patrick Mahomes." They're like, we don't know who that is. "Why are you wearing an Iowa State jacket and a TCU t-shirt?" And I said, "Because my son plays football for Iowa State." And no, I didn't say that. Suddenly I had become the enemy not of one side, but of both. Right? Well, if you're going to wear purple, wear purple. If you're going to wear red and gold, or dark red and crimson and gold, then wear. And they lost. The band was fantastic. So it did not feel good to be suddenly the enemy not of just one side. It would have been okay if I'd worn one set of colors and I could root against the other side, but suddenly I was hated by everyone. Later in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus will tell the parable of the Good Samaritan, and right before he does, he will, one of the Pharisees will, he says, "Love your neighbor as yourself," and one of the Pharisees will say, "Well, who is my neighbor?" And Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan as an example. My question for Jesus as he gives this list of really good advice and really hard things about what we should do to people we don't like is, Jesus, who is my enemy? Howard Thurman, in his book Jesus and the Disinherited, talks about this exact topic. In fact, he looks at these words of Jesus. This book, Jesus and the Disinherited, was an inspiration to the leaders of the civil rights movement. John Lewis carried a copy of this book in his backpack. Martin Luther King and Howard Thurman were friends and discussed this. Howard Thurman is a brilliant theologian. And as he talks about what the listeners of this sermon would have heard when they thought of their enemies, he says they would have thought of 3 types of enemies. The first is the personal enemy, the one who is in your primary life group. someone that you know personally, someone that has harmed you, someone that you just don't like, somebody that has a better trumpet than you do. Your enemy, your personal enemy. They would have immediately thought of the Romans, the other, the one that you have nothing in common with at all, the easiest perhaps to hate because they are far away, or they are the military, or they speak a different language, or they look differently. Thurman says that the personal enemy, the one closest to you, is actually the easiest one to resolve that disagreement. It just needs some understanding from both sides. Maybe the most painful, though, people that are closest to us. And then Thurman says there is this third group in Jesus' world, those who are close to you but who are working for the Romans, the tax collectors, the people that are empowering the Romans to do their work. Herod and his sons, they're Jewish, but they're still being mean to us. And he uses this model to talk about the civil rights movement. But as he continues, he says he writes these powerful words when dealing with the idea of who is your enemy and how might you change that situation. And Jesus says we are to love our enemy. Howard Thurman writes, the first step toward love is a common sharing of a sense of mutual worth and value. The first step toward love is a common sharing of a mutual sense, of a sense of mutual worth and value. Both sides must recognize within the other, whether that's someone close to you, whether that's the tax collector that lives down the street, whether that's your neighbor whose dog is always barking, whether that's the Romans, whether that's the people that are out there that you just don't like them and you're not sure why. There must be mutual worth and value. You must see each other in that way. So these enemies are clear in Jesus' day. I think maybe not so much in ours. So my next question for you today, not so much as who is your enemy, but why? Why is someone your enemy? When I was working at the church in Liberty, we did a little work with an organization that was trying to make some systemic changes in the world, do good work. And I attended several meetings where they were discussing trying to get changes made in the laws that surround payday loans. You're familiar with this business of predatory lending, they call it. Payday loans are loans that are normally given for a very short amount of time to people who typically really, really desperately need the money and charge as much as 400% interest. And they will be called due in a couple of weeks, and if you can't pay it, then they add the interest to the principal, and they charge 400% interest on the amount you loan plus the interest, and pretty soon you're so far behind that there's no way possible that you'll ever get caught up. And so this group was trying to do some work on that. I'm not smart enough to tell you where the status is of that legislation, but I saw something that capped it at 75. Capped it at 75%, which actually was for a very short period, and it still ended up being like 1,000% interest. Anyway, at one of those meetings where we were discussing what we could do, one of the presenters stood up and wrote a chart on a flip chart, wrote a thing, and I wish I could recreate it because I don't remember exactly what she said or she wrote, but she wrote kind of at the bottom, this is the situation, this is the thing we're looking at, and these are the laws that are in place, and these are the institutions that would need to change the way they're doing, and these are some ideas, and she built this pyramid up to the top, and I don't remember any of the rest of it because the part that was most important was the top. And at the very top of that pyramid, where we were talking about payday loans, about predatory lending, she wrote the word beliefs. She said, we can tackle all of these things about what we think is right or wrong, or what is good for the poor people, or but what you believe ultimately will affect what happens. And until we can change what we believe about things, none of these other things will change. If you believe that it's okay to charge 400% interest to people who can't afford to pay any, and you're okay with that, then there's no way we're ever going to change the system. So I remembered that, and I thought, beliefs, that's what I do. I'm not so good at the knocking on doors at the state capitol, which I did do once for a day. It was very uncomfortable and very unproductive. I work with beliefs. That's what we as clergy and as leaders of the church do. Let me work on that. So in trying to recreate what I saw on the board that day, I did find this chart, which is a really interesting thing, which I think is even better than the one I remembered. This is a cycle, and notice how this author, this person who was talking about kind of an individual personal thing, look at the big print they use for beliefs there at the top. And so beliefs lead to thoughts, which lead to feelings, which lead to actions, which lead to results. And then I love the circular thing and the results. So if everything in that thing matches up and what I believe and what I did and what I felt and what I said, where is just fine, it comes back to me and it reinforces that belief. Now, if something interrupts that, if somewhere along the line, it occurs to me that my next door neighbor has taken out a payday loan and suddenly, or my mother, my child, my sister, somebody I know and love is suddenly part of the system, then that gets jolted, right? Anything can enter that system and break it up, and when you get back to the beliefs, maybe those change. And then according to my friend, the beliefs, and from this chart, then things can start to change. There's Mahatma Gandhi says this: your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values become your destiny. There are many similar versions of that from different scholars. I liked that one. Your beliefs become your thoughts, and then we get into that, and then with the cycle, I think they go around. So again, if I believe that a certain person or a certain group of people is my enemy, inferior to me, we have different beliefs, not really good trumpet players, then all of those things in that cycle will continue to reinforce themselves. Now, for my theological training, and I'm making a little skip here, but I think this works, we are taught that there are two kinds of beliefs, two basic kinds: embedded beliefs or theologies, and deliberative beliefs or theologies. So embedded theologies or beliefs are the things that we just kind of know and we kind of believe, and things that we picked up through osmosis from a very young age. We just heard it said around us all the time, and we pick it up and we don't really realize it. Deliberative, which is a really hard word to say, is when we examine a belief and we go, oh, well, that's not right. 40 years later, maybe it was not right that I didn't tell Ben that if he tapped his foot at the same speed as the rest of the band, right? That was something I need to go back and think about. So embedded belief would be like, from a very young age, from the moment I was born, my mother held me in her arms and said, "You're going to be the best trumpet player in the world." She didn't talk like that, by the way. "You're going to be first chair the whole time." She did not talk that way. Like, that would be an embedded belief. And so if someone pushed back against that, I would go, "No, wait, that's what Mama said. She told me I was the best one." And then am I really terrible? Like, then I have to think about that. The deliberate belief is, yeah, it's okay if I wear a red and gold jacket when we play Iowa State at the football game. And Adam was telling me it was wrong, and I was sure it'd be okay. And then what happened? I had to change my mind. Embedded beliefs are those that and embedded beliefs are ones that we most often react to emotionally. When somebody says something and you just pop off and you don't know why you got mad, that's an embedded belief that you need to look at. So that's the way we kind of get to the idea of moving from having enemies and moving towards love. Now, I need to say something really, really, really important here. This text is not meant to ever encourage or condone abuse, and it is never a reason for anyone to stay in an abusive relationship of any kind, whether that's physical or emotional. You remember what Howard Thurman says, a common sharing of mutual worth and value. It's got to come from both sides, and sometimes you just have to step away, but it also teaches us not to respond. Now, there's something in the text in Matthew when Jesus tells a story that's very subtle that Luke leaves out. Not sure why. When Matthew tells us about Matthew says, if you're struck on the right cheek, turn to the left. You might notice in the Luke text, it just said, if someone strikes you on the cheek, turn the other. Well, there's something very specific culturally to being struck on the right cheek. If you were a Jewish person, a poor person, perhaps a servant. The assumption is everybody in the world is right-handed. If I wanted to strike Peggy on the right cheek, I would have to hit her with the back of my hand. This is an insult. This is how a master strikes a servant. This is how a superior strikes an inferior. Jesus says in Matthew, turn to them your left. And in that culture, it's weird, but this is how equals treated one another. If you're going to get in a fight, you would, right? A slap is demeaning. This is give them a chance. They have to treat you as an equal. Also in the culture, they wore two layers of clothing, a coat and a cloak. He says if they take your coat, give them your cloak as well. Weird kind of work of their culture is that if you were naked, it was not you who were embarrassed. It was the person who saw your nakedness. Jesus is telling them to respond in a way that you retain your dignity and your power. He's teaching nonviolent resistance in a way. But again, encourage you, he's teaching us to not react to pain with additional pain, to choose another course. And then sometimes deep wounds require forgiveness, and that's a whole other sermon. Just one little image that's in there that's so beautiful, and it's at the end, and I had no idea what it meant. But it talks about you will receive a good portion packed down, firmly shaken and overflowing. What was that? And I found this beautiful description of what would happen if you went to a Middle Eastern market, perhaps even to this day, and you bought flour. And they wouldn't sell you flour by the weight, they would sell it by the container, and they would take the container, and this merchant would put the flour in it until the container was full. And then this merchant would press the flour down and would shake the bag and make more room in the bag and press it down again and put more flour in and shake the bag and press it down and put more flour in and shake it down and press it and shake it and press it until that bag held more than you possibly could have imagined that it could hold until it was overflowing. That is the kind of love that God offers to us, a good portion packed down, firmly shaken and overflowing when we act in love. Gandhi says your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions. Howard Thurman tells us the first step toward love is a common sharing and a sense of mutual worth and value. Jesus tells us, love your enemies, do good, and lend expecting nothing in return. Be compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate. Give and it will be given. A good portion packed down will fall into your lap. The portion you give will determine the portion you receive in return. These wise words, including the words of John Lennon and Paul McCartney. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Amen. Let us pray. I invite you to join me in the response. Hear our prayer. That my words, God, in our mercy, your response is hear our prayer. Holy God, your cross stands before us as a light that shows us our failures and our salvation to your Son. We thank you for forgiving us and for coming along us to heal our pain and resentments. We yearn for your word and praise you for your love. God, in your mercy, hear our prayer. O giver of prayer that groans within us, teach us to pray for our enemies. Their names are many. Be with them, guard them from harm, and guide them in the way of your light. Save us from self-righteousness and help us begin our lives anew. God, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Heal the nations, mighty Lord. Rain peace on all people. Give hope to the hopeless and love to the lonely. Surprise the leaders of all nations with your joy. We cry out for reconciliation and plenty. God, in your mercy, hear our prayer. We beg comfort for the sick, O God. Make whole the broken, make wise the foolish, humble the powerful. Make glad the hearts of those who tend our loved ones. And for all those who are in pain, give them release and rest. Speak love to all who cry out silently. God, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Trusting in the mercy of your never-failing wisdom, we commend into your hands all for whom we pray. Through Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord, the one who taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven,
Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen. A couple of announcements. Today and next week, we, with the rest of our denomination, received the Week of Compassion offering, and there's a video here that will speak of it much better. We'll talk more good than I can. So let me get the things.
All right, Adam.
My name is Sammy Deacon. I'm the long-term project leader here at our Dayton site. So in 2019, there were 15 tornadoes that hit the Dayton area in one night, and they just kept coming all night long. Into the same area sometimes, over top of each other. In this area, 8 huge apartment complexes were wiped out, and that eliminated a lot of housing for a lot of people. Our ministry here is to work with the long-term recovery group. They've identified and vetted clients that need help. We help the disabled, the single-parent homes, those who have been taken by fraudulent contractors, people who are handicapped that have no other way to recover on their end, and we assist them with that recovery. And it's a blessing to be able to do that. The family that we're currently working with is a large family, and they have not been able to live together in the 2 years since they had to leave their home after the night after the tornado. They had been so taken advantage of by the contractor that they had started to give up hope of ever getting anywhere with their home, and we were able to come in and in 3 weeks have done more than she said that the contractor had done in months and months and months. And she just broke down in tears of joy. She said, "This is my home. I'm going to be home." And it's just overwhelming to be able to be a part of that, to get her back in her home.
In the third week of them coming in, they have fixed pretty much everything. They fixed stuff that didn't even explode.
My feelings and my thoughts about it. I mean, I'm very, very humble.
When we're volunteers, we come out for a week or so, and we have to sleep in a bed that isn't ours, or take a shower in a shower that isn't ours, and just really want to go home, but that's all they want to do. They just want to go home. Being able to be a part of that is awesome.
You can donate to Week of Compassion online. You can text it, and I think there are envelopes out on the table if you'd like to make an offering, and we'll get that off to them. I talk about it all the time, and I geek out when I do, but I know people who do this stuff, and that's what they're representing us in the world. And whoever put all those bird calls in there, that was brilliant. Did you hear all the birds singing in the background? So I'm sure they brought them in extra. Tomorrow afternoon, we've got a group gathering to do some planning for our 175th anniversary is this year, and we're looking to ways we want to celebrate that, and also looking forward to Lent and Easter. Those folks have been identified and encouraged to attend. The Lent devotional books are here. They're out on the chapel over there. If you're able to give a small donation, that would help, but feel free to take one. And then we'll do worship on Ash Wednesday, the first day of Lent, March 2nd, a week from Wednesday night. Our communion hymn is in this very room. Please remain seated as we sing. He took bread, he blessed it, he broke it, and he gave it to them and said, "Take and eat, this is my body." In the same way, he took a cup, gave thanks, and he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from this, all of you, this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many so that their sins may be forgiven." And those familiar notes are indeed our closing hymn. They'll know we are Christians. Let's stand and sing together.
Restore.
do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. For God is kind to all and full of mercy, filled with life-giving Spirit, the Spirit of Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. We bear the image of the risen Christ and take delight in the abundance of what we have already received. Go in peace. Amen.